Hello, it's Lori Barton, your friendly speech instructor, and I'm here today to talk with you about one of the most insignificant fundamentals of creating an effective public speech, and that would be the speech outline. The outline allows you to organize your ideas and make sure you've established credibility and that you've used plenty of different types of evidence to keep your audience engaged and interested, and which will of course make you more effective in speaking. So with that in mind, we're going to talk about how to build an outline from the beginning and working our way up to the end so that when you've finished, you have a solid document that you can use to create your speaking notes and thereby giving an effective public speech. So for the purposes of this class, we've established an outline template for you. And that outline template looks like this. And you can, in essence, fill in the blank because most of the work has been done for you in terms of organization. So we've talked about this in class, but I'm going to walk you through kind of what you want to think about as you're creating the outline. So first of all, before you can do anything, of course, you have to have a speech topic, and that topic has probably already been approved by me because it has to be a topic that's related to one of the interpersonal skills you've learned about in the first part of this course. So I've chosen effective listening skills as the topic for this speech. I've already done some research. I've done my research report and my audience analysis, and so I'm ready now to begin my outline. As we talked about, you should always do the body of your outline first. You can't really write your introduction and conclusion until the body has been completed. So the first thing, of course, we have to do is to decide what our three main points are going to be. Well, first of all, I'm going to go back to the speech topic because effective listening skills in the workplace is probably more specific to what I want to do for this particular speech, though I'll be talking about how those skills impact you personally as well. All right, so again, the first thing we have to do is decide upon what our three main points are going to be, okay? Well, I've already completed this outline in another document, so I'm going to pull that document up and cut and paste the main points as we go, so that will kind of help you see what's happening. So actually, I think the first thing I'll do is show you the preview of main points. We're going to put that in. That's going to be the fifth purpose then of your introduction, and it's going to go right here. Okay, so now we can see what the three main points are going to be. A working definition of listening, why effective listening is important, and some specific techniques that can be used in the workplace. So we can take those three elements from the preview and create sentences for our main points, because you may remember that main points must be in sentence form. So we'll pull back up the document and let's take a look at the main points. Okay, my first main point, of course, was defining listening. All right, so I'll go in and pull that main point, and you'll notice that it's going at Roman numeral 1, and it's my first main point. First, let's define listening and the two particular types, and you'll see above in the preview statement that that lines up with what I've said I'm going to talk about. The second main point then, we'll move on down, is the importance of listening skills in the workplace. So we'll move those into our blank document. Move down to main point number 2. Okay. And there are always some formatting issues, of course, or at least there are for me. Maybe you guys are better or more technological savvy than I am. Okay, now we're going to go then to main point number 3. Now, of course, you'll be writing these as you go. I've already written them and put them in the other document, so I'm able just to transfer them to this template. But what I want you to notice about these is that all three of these main points are in sentence form. It's not a single word or phrase, but a complete sentence that lets the reader of your outline, which typically is me, know exactly what it is that you hope to prove or say in that main point. All right, so the next thing we want to do, we've already done the research report and we've written oral footnotes that go with each of these main points, hopefully. And so we're going to take a look at those oral footnotes and where they might go from the research report. We're always going to put them, just for the sake of simplicity, we're always going to put them at capital letter A. Unless there's a second one under that main point. But your first one's always going to go there because it will make much more sense to you, and it's easier to think about if you put them in the same place under every main point. So we'll start with the first main point again and look at what our oral footnote is for that main point. You'll see here under item A, this was the oral footnote that I'm bringing over from my research report. And I'm just going to place it right here at item A. Again, some formatting problems, not a big deal. Okay, now I'd like to point out, as we talked about in Chapter 11, you must show in the outline what type of evidence each of your sources is, and sometimes you can even show types of evidence in areas of the outline that are not sources. But to begin with, we want to label each type of evidence. Well, you'll remember your choices from Chapter 11 with the additional 2 that we added, description and definition. And so we can take a look at this source and see that Matthew McKay in this book is defining listening. So it makes sense that it's definition. Also, you may remember that testimony are words that come directly from an authority of some sort on the subject. So in this case, we have both definition and testimony with one source, with one piece of source material. So that's great. We have to show 5 types of evidence. We've already shown 2. Now, before I finish main point 1, I'm going to go ahead and bring my other oral footnotes over into the other 2 main points. So I'll go to main point number 2, and you'll see that under A, I have an oral footnote that I'm just going to bring over and put at item A under main point 2. Again. Okay. Now let's take a look at this. We see percentages in this particular source. 40% of his or her income by listening, 80% of their salaries by listening. So we automatically know when we're talking about percentages that we're dealing with statistics. So we've labeled then in parentheses in bold that this piece of evidence is statistics. Now I would go on to main point number 3, but what you're going to notice in this particular speech is that 2, my second main point, has another source that's mentioned here. So because it's another oral footnote, I'm going to go ahead and copy it and transfer it then to our blank outline under B. All right, and we'll fix our formatting as we always have to do. So you'll see now that we have another statistic. Now I can label this if I want to as well, but I already have a statistic, testimony, and definition. So for me, unless this particular source is something new, I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to leave it unlabeled because I've already shown all of the types of evidence that this one represents. So now I can go to main point number 3 and find that oral footnote, okay, under item A, and this is a long one. Okay, I'm just going to keep moving. All right, so we're looking now for the oral footnote that goes with, okay, I've got to pause. Okay, so now we're going to go back to the research report, wherever you have placed your footnotes, and this time you'll notice that this is a longer oral footnote, which is not a problem, that we're going to put in under A for the third main point. Okay. Now this time I labeled the information because you'll notice it's explanation. There are examples here, so I'm using the term explanation to cover all of these examples. So so far then I've shown 4 types of evidence. I've got definition, testimony for the first, statistics for the second, explanation for the third. So for the fourth. So I still have to come up with one additional type of evidence that I'm going to show in the outline, but I'm not going to worry about that yet because I have other things to do first. So next I'm going to go back in and fill in each of the main points. So I've now included my main points in sentence form, and I've added all of my oral footnotes. So I can go in and add additional information that I'm going to talk about with each one of these. So first let's go to, that's not what I wanted to do. It's always lots of fun. I want to go back here. We love formatting in Word, don't we? All right, so I'm going to go pick up the rest of what I plan on talking about under the first main point. And that is, there are two types of listening. Okay, two types of listening. So I've defined it with my source material, but this information continues on from the source with more specifics on the two different types of listening there are. So I'm adding those under item B. I'm going to tighten this up a little. Now look, remember that description is one of our choices for types of evidence, and in this case we're talking about physically responding. So anything to do with the five senses, you'll recall, is description. So I can call this particular piece of evidence that I'm using description. So now I have all five pieces showing that I need to show. All right, so now we can finish main point number 2. If there's anything left, we may have already pulled all that information because we used two sources there, and we have. And we've already covered all of the information in main point number 3 as well, except we need a, whenever you do an outline, you need a B if you have an A. You may remember that from high school. So our B in this case is going to be simply, oops, we don't want that in bold. Now we will discuss each of these elements individually. Okay? All right, so lo and behold, I have finished the body almost of my outline. The only thing I need to do now is to include the transition statements to get me from one main point to the other. And you may remember that there are a couple ways to do that. The most basic way is what we'll use. So let's go to the one that's between main points 1 and 2 first. And we're going to say, now that we have a good definition of listening, let's talk about its importance in the workplace, or let's say this, in your life and in the workplace. Okay, so there I have my transition saying what we just talked about and what we're now going to go on to talk about. Okay, then we have another transition we have to write. And we can use the same format as we did before, or we can be a little more creative. So how about this time I'll say, finally, oop, I'm in bold again. Finally, let's look at some specific skills we can use to improve our listening in the workplace. So now we have the transition statement there as well. Okay, so now our body is completely finished. We've got the information we're going to use. We've got the source material. We've got 5 types of evidence. We've written our transition statements. We have our oral footnotes. So now we're ready to think about the introduction and conclusion. Well, you may recall there are 5 purposes to the introduction. So the first thing I want to do is get some interest from the audience. And I like to start with a rhetorical question or a powerful statement, something that's surprising they may not know. or always a short story, a narrative, or a hypothetical story. That often will help the listeners get involved in what it is you have to say. So I selected a hypothetical story, okay, about listening to the news, waiting to hear the weather report, and then realizing that the weather report is over and you were sitting in the room but you never heard the weather report because you were listening to the news but you weren't really, or you were hearing the news but you weren't really listening. You weren't paying attention for understanding. You'll notice here I happen to also use a source here and another oral footnote. You don't have to do that. It's just something I chose to do to get people interested in the difference in hearing and listening, which is kind of laying the foundation for the rest of the speech. You'll also notice I went ahead and labeled it definition, though I didn't have to because I have my 5 types already labeled in the body, but I just decided to do that. Now, the next thing I have to do is state my topic. Now, this doesn't mean you just use the same topic you used at the top. What this means is you state your topic in sentence form the way you plan to reveal it to your audience. So you'll see it's a little bit longer than just a general stating of the topic. Okay, so I'm going to put this in, and you'll see listening is one of the most important communication skills you can have. So I've revealed my topic in narrative form or in short story, expositionary form, so that my listeners will understand in general what the speech is going to be about. Now, the next 2 steps are sometimes overlooked by students, but they're very important. The first is to establish the importance of the topic. Why do the listeners want to listen? If they don't feel some kind of personal investment in what you're saying, if they don't think it applies to them, they're not going to pay attention. So your job is to establish how this topic is important to everyone. So you're going to create 2 or 3 sentences that do that very thing. And you'll see what I decided to do here. Dang it. Okay, so I've made a decision. I think I'm going to, for stating my topic, I'm going to leave the first sentence I have there because I don't need quite this much information for stating my topic. And I'm going to put the rest of this down under establishing the importance of the topic. As I said, the information must be relevant to your audience, and they must understand that ahead of time in order for them to pay much attention in the first place. So that being said, we're going to put the rest of that sentence here. How well you listen has a major impact on your relationships with others. And most importantly, for the purposes of this speech, since we're primarily talking about listening in the workplace, your job effectiveness. Okay, so they're thinking, this is something that's important and maybe I need to pay attention. Now, the next really important thing you have to do is establish your personal credibility. And you think to yourself, well, I'm not an expert in listening. How am I credible? Well, you're credible because you've done research on this topic and no one else has in the room. So your job is to let them know that you've done this research and you're going to share it with them, and that's what gives you a position of authority over these people in terms of this particular topic. So I'm going to, in my case, I had some personal experience regarding listening. So I'm going to tell my audience about my personal experience. But the other thing I'm going to do is tell them that I've done some additional research. I hope you can see this right here. I give a little bit of personal background, but then I say, I attended a seminar that included effective listening in the workplace as a topic, and I've done some additional research on effective listening techniques as well. I'm going to share that information with you today. So now we've met all 5 purposes then of the conclusion. We've drawn the audience in with the gain attention. We've revealed the topic and told them why it's important to them. We've established personal credibility, and we've previewed the main points. So all we have left to do then is the conclusion. Okay, not a hard job at all. All right, so the conclusion, as we know, has 3 primary purposes. All right, the first is to summarize, and I think you're all familiar with that. It's the same way you would summarize in a paper. So in essence, you're just going to summarize what you've talked about that day. So I'm going to move down to my conclusion. So what have we learned? Here are the things that we learned in this speech, so that's what's going to go under my summary. Okay. We've learned that effective listening is vital for communication success in our professional lives, and we've discussed some techniques to help us all be better listeners. Now, activation of audience response confuses people sometimes. All we really mean here is what do you want the audience to take away from this speech? Do you want them to understand something important you've told them? How do you want them to do something about it? Okay, so for activation of audience response, we're going to say perhaps now, there we go at the bold again, now that you have a better understanding of the importance of effective listening in the workplace, I hope you will practice the techniques we have discussed and become a better listener. Okay, so basically you're telling them what you hope will happen as a result of them having listened to your speech. Finally, of course, is the closure, which I also like to call the memorable close, because it's the last thing you're leaving your audience with. So there are lots of ways to think about it. I often will use a quote to close, or I'll answer a question I ask in the introduction, or I'll complete a story I began in the introduction. You can do pretty much anything as long as it's something that will stick with the audience. So in this case, I decided to use a quote. So I'm going to show you then under closure, I'm going to put my quote. Have you been listening to the speech, or have you only been hearing it? That was just my clever way of reminding them of the difference in hearing and listening. How many of the 5 techniques that we discussed can you remember? I'd like to close with the following quote. I have the quote there, and then I always end by thanking the audience for their time, or just say thank you or thank them for listening. Okay, so now my conclusion is done as well. And all that remains is my bibliography. And I like for you to include this bibliography in the event that I want to look at one of your sources and see if you might pull better or more information from it or something like that. So that's why I like it to be included. So for this particular speech, I had, looks like 5 sources. Okay, I've put them in MLA format. They're alphabetical, they're done well, and I can put them into my bibliography. Now you'll also be able to pull these from your research report, because if you remember, the research report asks you to include your MLA sources as well as your oral footnotes. So you won't have to do them except once, and then you can just pull them over from that form into this document. So lo and behold, we have created an outline with all its pieces. So for a quick recap, let's take a look at what we've done. We decided upon our topic, and we put our topic in the topic window. We determined our 3 main points. We wrote the preview first so we would know what points we wanted to take a look at. We wrote our 3 main points in sentence form at Roman numerals 1, 2, and 3. We included our oral footnotes under item A of each of the main points. In the second main point, I had another oral footnote, so we included that. Then we went back in and filled in with additional information we think we're going to offer about each of our main points. Okay. All right. Then we wrote our transition statements to get us from one point to the next. Finally, we went back and completed the introduction. We had already done the preview, but we did the first 4 elements. Then we went to the conclusion and completed the 3 purposes of the conclusion. And we ended by including the bibliography at the end. Okay? So That's your step-by-step of creating an outline. Now, what I could do at this point is take this, or what I will do is take this outline and I'll create speaking notes. We'll talk at a later date about how to create those speaking notes without putting too much information down so that you won't read your entire speech. But until then, I hope this has helped with your development of an outline and that you understand now how important the outline is in creating the foundation for an effective public speech. Thank you.